Prostitution laws in this country were changed this past Saturday, but the Premier of Ontario probably isn't pleased. She's launching a constitutional challenge on these things, or at least an investigation by the Attorney General. Paige McPherson joins us here with more on this. Basically, that's what it is, constitutional, right?
Yeah, so, well, I mean, it's hard to tell, I think, based on what exactly Wynne has said so far. She says that she has some problems with the legislation as it is, and that she's ensuring that her Attorney General is going to investigate it. So, yes, I think that the main challenges or grievances that people would have with this legislation is the constitutionality of certain aspects of it, particularly surrounding the limits on communications that prostitutes can partake in for their career. So she wants to launch this constitutional challenge, or rather, she wants to launch this investigation into the constitutionality to see, because what she said was that yes, the province has the duty to enforce this federal legislation, which of course they do.
The law of the land now.
The law of the land, exactly, and those are the words that she used, but that it's important for them to satisfy themselves. So she said that we need to satisfy ourselves that we are actually respecting the Charter and the Constitution. So that's sort of what she's launched. It's really, I think, thrown a little bit of a bomb into the diplomacy battle that's been going on between the federal government and the Ontario government. And I really think that that's, you know, mostly due to Kathleen Wynne sort of prodding at Harper over issues like this.
Okay, no, your point is well made, because it seems a little heavy-handed to take the Charter road on this thing. What were her options? Yeah,
exactly. So, and that's the big question, right? I mean, if she wanted to challenge this law, which of course we expected this law to be challenged. Lots of people came out on both sides, I think, of this law when it was proposed and then when it was passed this past weekend. But it's sort of a curveball, I think, for Kathleen Wynne to be the one front and center challenging this law, for, you know, the Premier of a province to be the one challenging this federal criminal legislation. So what are her options? Well, her options really, other than just saying, okay, we're going to challenge this in court, which, like I said, would be certainly something if it was led by the Premier of Ontario, as opposed to, let's say, the head of a sex workers advocacy group or something like that. The other option, I mean, is, I guess we have to take into account that if she were to challenge that law, she would need a new sort of de facto law. Instead, let's say, okay, she wants to put the challenge forward. She could just sit on her hands and wait until that happens. But on the other hand, we have some Toronto councillors, mainly Kristen Wong Tam, saying, in the meantime, while you're looking into the constitutionality of this law, or while you're challenging it, you should tell the police not to enforce it. That would be a total bombshell, I think, in terms of diplomatic relations between the two levels of government. If she were to say that in this particular case, you know, going to override basically the criminal code right now, criminal legislation, and not police it, that is something that we see Toronto councillors telling her to do. So that's, I suppose, an option. She would need to pass legislation in terms of policing. She couldn't actually change the federal law, obviously, but she would have to pass a bill about the actual policing of it. I don't know whether that would ever be passed, but that would certainly be a route that is possible to take and would be absolutely, I think, a huge deal diplomatically.
Yeah, okay, diplomatically, because you make the point that these two, Harper and Wynne, don't get along. This is another example.
Absolutely. This is another in a long line of challenges that Wynne has had and sort of confronted Harper with. So from the very outset of her campaign here in Ontario, she was challenging Harper regularly, more so than she was challenging her opponents, Tim Hudak or Andrea Horwath. She challenged Harper over equalization, saying that Ontario didn't get its fair share of federal transfers, that it needs more money from the federal government. She said that time and again in her campaign. She also challenged Harper
That's a mathematical equation, of course, but
absolutely.
She thought it had political bias.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's not as though the Harper government was penalizing Ontario specifically for anything. Realistically, it's a new thing that Ontario is even on equalization, that it's even a have-not province. So yes, but you know, that I guess was could gain her some political points there. She also challenged the federal government over the Ring of Fire funding, and she never, of course, referred to it as the federal government. She always said the Harper government. They wanted more money for their Ring of Fire energy development in northern Ontario, and so she challenged him on that, and she really has challenged him consistently since then. And what we've seen in turn is the federal government really, I think, say back to Wynne, you need to get your financial house in order. Don't ask us for more money. And likewise, with this issue with prostitution, we've seen now the federal government come out and say to Kathleen Wynne, why don't you not worry about these distractions and confrontations and instead worry about getting your province's fiscal house in order? Because, I mean, it is, I think, a fair point made. You know, it's a question of priorities.
Well, and until they get their house in order financially, how can the federal government be expected to pay anything? Because they don't know where the money's going to go, except to possibly the wrong spots.
Yeah, well, it's true. The equalization equation is so tricky. I mean, for so long in Canada, the federal government has really relied on Ontario as a giver of equalization, you know, so that could go out to the other provinces, mainly the maritime provinces. Now we see that flipped. What used to be the economic powerhouse is no more. And yeah, it makes it really tricky for the federal government. But certainly it's proved an interesting political point for Kathleen Wynne. And I think that you have to view, at least based on the campaigns that I've covered, and I've covered a few Liberal wins across the country in the last 2 years, I think you have to view the Liberals as a network, same as the Conservatives are, but more so, I think, with the Liberals in terms of the alignment between the federal party and the provincial parties outside of BC, because the BC Liberals are different. And so I think that the moves are calculated in that way, so as, you know, to sort of be streamlined with what the federal Liberals are doing. And in this case, it's interesting because Justin Trudeau's position on prostitution is not very clear. It's definitely not crystal clear. It's not exactly morally consistent with other policies that he's put forward, but certainly challenging Harper on it with no clear alternative as to what she's going to do. Kathleen Wynne simply just challenging Harper on it, that's certainly in line with what Justin Trudeau does.
Yeah, exactly. My enemy is your enemy. Paige, thanks so much.
Thank you.